You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. This is 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Over the last 4 decades, a variety of forces have radically transformed the structure of American metropolitan areas. On the simplest level, the combination of federal tax and spending priorities have resulted in the mass exodus of residents, retail and manufacturing and office functions to the new edges defined by the beltways. The resulting sweeping disinvestment has left older downtowns and inner ring neighborhoods gasping for resources. In the face of these national trends, Center City's planning and economic development offices are swimming against the tide. Some cities, like Boston, Massachusetts, and Charleston, South Carolina, have demonstrated amazing flexibility and success. In Cincinnati, Ohio, on the other hand, the sense is that the Economic Development Office has been unimaginative, bureaucratic, and ineffective. The recent symbols of that failure include a parking lot where Nordstrom's was supposed to rise, stalled work on the riverfront banks projects, hundreds of vacant low-income housing units with no plan for redevelopment, and all in the glaring contrast with the seeming energy displayed across the river in Newport. To address this situation, Mayor Charlie Luken appointed a commission to recommend ways to reform the economic development function of the city. The commission included 18 people, chaired by Fifth Third Chairman George Schaefer and City Manager Valerie Lemmy. The commission included representatives with a downtown focus, neighborhood roots, developers, unions, and the Metropolitan Housing Authority. The commission recommendations include proposals for both inside and outside City Hall. Inside, the Economic Development Division would be streamlined and brought under closer supervision by the city manager. The Department of Community Development and Planning would focus on services for neighborhoods. Outside City Hall, the Cincinnati Development Authority, the CDA, would be a private nonprofit organization built on the present Port Authority structure, which would participate in economic development projects anywhere in the city involving public-private partnerships and would have a power to own, build, lease, and finance those projects. Finally, the Cincinnati Development Corporation would be a quasi-public organization to facilitate projects of regional significance in the downtown area. To discuss the proposed economic development reform, I am joined this morning by Chip Gerhardt, the principal consultant to the Lemmy-Schaefer Commission from the local firm of KMK Consulting. Chip, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thanks, Dan.
Wearing a different hat this time, but be that as it may. Does all of this, I just did a quick summary, does all of this report, this work, rest on the assumption that the way we've been doing things has failed? Are we admitting that it didn't work and that we have missed the boat?
Well, bottom line, yes. I think that Cincinnati, though, is not unique when compared to other older industrial-based communities. The economic development is different today. It requires a different set of strategies and competencies, and frankly, a different focus by governmental entities. Today, unlike in the past, the government cannot and probably should not be the leader when it comes to the economic development strategy or mission of a community. You need to bring in a broader focus and more resources in order to be successful now.
It seems to me that that's one of the basic points here. I mean, getting past all of the details, is that it is an admission that government can't do this, that we're stepping back from and pulling back the role of government. Would that be fair?
In a sense it is. It also recognizes, though, Dan, that government plays a very important role in economic development, that it has assets and capabilities that are not available to the private sector. And it's got a very valid stake in what goes on in the community. So the recommendations, as you described, is a combination of newly enhanced public or quasi-public and private entities, as well as a reorganized and more appropriately focused inside government.
Let's talk about the inside government business for a minute. It looks like one thing that happens is the economic development staff shrinks in size and gets more focused. It looks like there's only about 9 people. Is that correct?
Well, the recommendations are twofold. It is the creation of an economic development division within the city manager's office that is focused on facilitating major economic development as it comes in from the private sector. It also has a responsibility to assist in working through the bureaucracies that are inherent in any government, permitting, zoning, other regulatory functions, assisting the private sector as they work their way through that system, and to represent the city when its resources are called upon to assist private sector development.
One of the things that's promised is, or laid out here, is a one-stop development center.
Right.
I don't want to be cynical, but I feel like I've heard that many, many times before from the city government. We're going to create a one-stop development center that'll help developers cut through the red tape, and all we do is hear stories about how that just continues. Why is this one any different?
Well, I think that this one's different. We've recognized and very vividly outlined the problem. If you walk in the door of City Hall requesting a permit, there are 473 steps to get out the door with the permit. The administration, the members of council all recognize that the bureaucracy, just the number of steps you have to take is a serious problem. The difference here, in addition to the finally recognition on all levels, not only the practitioners, the people inside, the elected officials, but the development center is going to be off-site. The people that will staff it will have a responsibility to see that the work is done from a development perspective. It will be part of the development.
When you say it's off-site, it's not in City Hall?
Correct.
It is not staffed by city employees?
It is staffed by city employees, but historically, the people that accept a piece of paper on a permitting, for instance, they're working for a specific department or division within city government that is responsible to see that this permit is done appropriately. That's the job. And it's not done in a larger context of development. And so by making this a development office, staffing it with representatives from the newly formed Economic Development Division and the reconstituted Department of Community Development and Planning, you will have the assumption is that the attitude will shift from one of moving paper from one pile to the next, however quickly, to how does this enhance overall development in the city of Cincinnati.
Okay, so, but you're still going to have to get all those forms filled out.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's all still going to be there. It's
right.
just hopefully facilitated.
And rightly so. You need to have checks and balances.
Right. The other part of this is, in the last budget cycle, one of the things that was done and part of the reorganization inside, and you just referenced it, was a consolidation. The independent planning division was done away with and put in with the Department of Neighborhoods and whatever. There are some people who really worry that the combination of elimination of the planning department, which has a tremendous history in Cincinnati, in combination with a lot of these development functions being taken outside of City Hall, that in effect the city's control, the people's control of development process is going to be lost to the developers. And very specifically, the fear that the sort of thing that has gone on in Oakley with big box development, and a lot of people want to say, gee, maybe that wasn't the best use of that land, that we're just going to get more of that we're going to have turned over control to private developers.
Well, I think that the recommendations provide enough checks and balances to ensure that you won't have a community where developers run rampant in doing whatever it is that they want. The planning, and there is a very real and appropriate place for planning, but for too long, as it was recognized by the task force, it seemed as though planning was done for planning's sake, as opposed to be combined with what's realistic in today's marketplace. Plans, there are hundreds of plans sitting on shelves in City Hall that have great pictures, and they're not realistic. What has been contemplated is that you tie the planning component with the development component inside City Hall to ensure that what's being planned can be done, and also what wants to be done by the development community fits within the plans that the government needs to.
Let's move outside City Hall now, because the really creative parts of this are these new entities. One, Cincinnati Community Development Corporation, CDC, and then the CDA.
Right.
One focuses on downtown, one focuses on much broader area.
Right.
One of these is basically building on the Port Authority, right?
Correct.
Explain that a little bit. How will that expand in its power and its scope?
The recommendation by the task force was to reconstitute the existing Port Authority to one that has citywide jurisdiction and much more significant powers available under the Ohio Revised Code.
For example, what kind of powers would they have?
The ability to issue bonds, finance, hold property. Eminent domain is one of those issues that has been discussed, but is under debate by City Council right now.
When you say it could issue bonds, against what? Could it put a bond levy on the ballot?
The task force specifically stated that it would not. That is taxing power. That this development authority should not have the ability to place a tax on the ballot. So that is. It's available under Ohio law, but it can be removed by local ordinance. So our recommendation is that it not have that power. By issuing bonds, I mean from a financial standpoint, right, against a revenue stream.
And what is, when you say it has the power of eminent domain, we see this being argued in a smaller situation in Norwood right now. What is the Commission's recommendation on this new body having powers of eminent domain?
Well, port authorities in Ohio, if granted that power by the local jurisdiction, have the ability to exercise eminent domain just as a city or county would. They have to go through the same legal procedures. The task force has recommended that this body have the ability to utilize eminent domain. However, it's a controversial issue, and if these recommendations are adopted and the formation of the CDA comes to fruition, but council wants to maintain the ability to exercise eminent domain in its own right, then it's certainly within their purview, and I think that it's not an issue that kills the deal from a task force recommendation standpoint.
The other body focuses, the CDC, focuses on the downtown, on projects that have, I think it's stated, regional significance, but they're in the basin area.
Right.
What's the difference between, why do we need two bodies? Why do we need the CDA and the CDC? I wasn't sure about that.
Well, if you look at most communities that are successful in economic development around the country, they have a powerful private development corporation, which the Cincinnati Development Corporation would be. Private money, privately staffed, with a private board of directors, in partnership with a public entity, the Cincinnati Development Authority. And you need private money coming into the deals to make it happen. Mm-hmm. Government should not be a hindrance to appropriate and contemplative development. I mean, private money has to flow into it, and it is this. The partnership, the public-private partnership, you hear it so often, but what's truly anticipated here is a well-financed and powerful development corporation that is focused on primarily downtown development.
This is all coming out of the city side of things and the proposals, but the Hamilton County has real concerns and interest about this. Where do we stand with the acceptance, embracing of this report?
The recommendations included what we called a port transition team. We have had one meeting with David Krings. Mm-hmm. I've met with Commissioner Dallin and Commissioner Heimlich, and the task force. Certain representatives from the task force are presenting at the county staff meeting on Monday, the 19th, to further discuss this. Certainly the county has very real and valid interest at stake here, commitments in place by the present Port Authority.
On the banks
and brownfield development. and we need to resolve those. And the county is a important partner as we move through this next stage. But the task force felt it had to put something on the table by way of recommendation in order to start this discussion.
What's your expectation, and we're almost out of time, what's your expectation of when this could be implemented? And secondly, can we take pieces of this? This is a very complex proposal, and implement pieces, or does it need to be done as a whole because it's integrated?
It is integrated. I mean, it is a synergistic combination of entities and capabilities inside city government, outside, quasi-governmental, and so it is best kept as a whole package. That is the way in which the task force felt that we could jumpstart economic development and maintain its momentum for the future. The timing, we're hoping that ordinances are presented to City Council before they go on summer break, which would be by June 25th. That's their last meeting.
So we're on a pretty short timeline.
We're moving quickly and recognizing the importance of all of the issues. It's a monumental task, but I'm confident that all will recognize the value in these recommendations and hopefully move forward.
Chip, it's been helpful. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Dan.
And we're going to follow this and maybe have you back. Stay tuned. After the break, a concrete product produced by Cincinnati Can.
All rise. This Court of Common Pleas is now in session. The Honorable Michael L. Savage presiding. Please be seated and come to order.
One of the basic responsibilities and privileges of citizenship is serving on juries. This new video to help people called for jury duty understand their responsibilities has been produced by the Justice Task Force of Cincinnati Can. Over the last 2 years, hundreds of citizens have volunteered through Cincinnati Can to work on issues relevant to improving intergroup relations in Cincinnati. One of the action teams has focused on police and justice issues. This team led the effort to balance punishments for similar laws between the city and the county and pushed successfully for the increase in jurors' pay. Now, with the help of Xavier University, they have produced a video to prepare people called for jury duty to fulfill their responsibilities. To discuss the new jury training video, I am joined this morning by John Norwine, the Executive Director of the Cincinnati Bar Association. John, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Dan, thank you.
Why was this video necessary?
Two different reasons. We decided that we wanted a video in Hamilton County which showed that you could be black, white, or any other race and still be a participant in the court process. We want to make sure that people coming in as jurors realize that there were black faces as well as white faces at the courthouse, and that you had to treat everybody equally, that you didn't discriminate, and that the courthouse was not a place for prejudice.
What had existed? How did jurors get trained before this? Was there a video that existed before?
There was a video which was about 10 years old, but it was a compilation of videos from other courts across the country, just kind of some things that were put together. It wasn't a bad video, but it wasn't particularized to Hamilton County and really didn't show what we do here. We wanted to make sure our jurors had a message as far as what you do here in Hamilton County.
A lot of the video is, and by the way, I want to say that video is hosted by Michelle Hopkins from Channel 5, and all of the stations contribute to different things, and Channel 5 made a big contribution here. Let's recognize that. But a lot of this video is really very detailed instructional sorts of things, telling people what they'll see in the courtroom, right?
Right. It's important that when they come in their first morning that they get an idea of what to expect, because you get kind of a summons, you show up for jury duty, and you really don't know what you are to do, and particularly what you are not to do.
What are some examples of what you're not to do?
You cannot discuss a case with your friends, with your coworkers, or with your co-jurors before the judge tells you you can. You can't go home and do an experiment to try to figure out perhaps what really is going on in the courtroom. you can't do independent research. But you don't know that until you see this or until a judge tells you what you can and can't do.
And you know, this point that you made about the variety of people who are in the courthouse and in the courtroom, those of us who sort of get to the courthouse every once in a while know that there's a lot of black lawyers, there's a lot of black workers, bailiffs, clerks, whatever at the courthouse, but that isn't seen by everybody, and that's sort of one of the important things you were trying to get across here, right?
Sure. We want every juror to be comfortable there. We want them to understand that they're not alone at the courthouse, that there's somebody just like them.
Yeah. And how, you know, in Cincinnati, in Hamilton County, how many jurors will see this on a regular basis? How much will this get used?
They'll show it once a week to about 100 to 150 jurors. At times they have so many on a Monday that they'll show it at the same time but in 2 different rooms because they can't fit all of them in one room. So this is going to be seen by 4,000 or 5,000 people a year at least.
And at the same time, does, you know, a lot of what the jury does happens behind doors in that deliberation room after they've heard all of the testimony, all the evidence presented. How much can you tell them? And I got to say, I've only been called for jury duty once. I ended up on 3 different juries in those 3 weeks, and I found it an incredibly fascinating experience. I'm really glad I did it. But one of the big questions of mine, nobody ever said what happened, didn't seem, I don't remember him telling us, what happens behind the doors once you go into that jury room. How much can this video really tell people?
It tells them a little bit about their job as far as deliberation, but primarily you're going to get your instructions from a judge in the courtroom about what to do and what not to do back in the jury room. One of the judges was insistent that we emphasize in the video that jurors must respect each other because 2 of her jurors had a fight back in the jury room.
Literally?
Literally had a fight. So it's, I guess every jury is different, and what goes on back in the jury room can vary a great deal.
How did you decide what went into this, what the messages were? Who got to have input into this?
We showed we got a script actually from a video done by the Columbus Bar Association in Franklin County. We used that as an outline and then showed the script to 4 or 5 judges, what we call our presiding judges in Hamilton County. We showed it to the court administrator, to the jury commissioner, allowed all of them to tinker with it and try to make sure that there was a unified message that they all thought was appropriate to present.
And so they sort of got to chime in on what they thought were the most important
Right.
things, like this one judge's
Exactly.
experience with a jury arguing and fighting and whatever. People have, while we've been talking, we've seen a couple of little clips run over the top of us here. The people you actually see in this video, the jurors will see when they come in for training. Is that a real jury? Was that a real trial?
Those were 15 to 18 employees of the Cincinnati Bar Association, who the toughest part for them was that they all had to wear the same clothes 3 days in a row and go to the courthouse.
Had to clean them up and make them look nice.
That's right. We did a lot of dry cleaning at the end of that week.
Yeah, that video, this video business is a tough business. How important from race relations, because that's where Cincinnati Can's coming from, how important is a project like this, and how much impact do you hope it might have?
I think that what we've done is make an incremental change. It's not a huge leap forward. It doesn't equalize the races in Hamilton County, but it does show people that no matter what race you are, you have a place at the courthouse. You have a place in our justice system, and it emphasizes the fact that we just do not and cannot discriminate.
Real practical question, which isn't addressed in the video, is how do you get called for jury duty? We have less than 1 minute. Who does and doesn't get called for jury duty?
Right now, it's strictly random selection from registered voters in Hamilton County. So you can get called once a year. You could get called not at all in 30 years.
But only if you're a registered voter.
Only if you're a registered voter at this time.
And is there any discussion inside of CAN to change that? Because registered voters, as we all know, registration is only a narrow slice of society.
We are looking at the possibility of doing that also through motor vehicle registration. Don't know where that's going to come out, but that's a future project.
Okay. And is that something, in this past week there's been discussion that CAN is going to shut down, phase out, transition, whatever. Will this committee continue?
Parts of it will continue. We're just figuring out exactly how they will continue and where and under whose supervision.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thanks for being here. And thank you for being part of 12 Newsmakers. Have a good week. See you next week.
The first thing you will probably do behind closed doors is select a foreperson who will see that the discussion is carried on in an orderly fashion and that every juror has an opportunity to express his or her viewpoint.
Considering that it was dark outside and there was no headlights on the car coming down the street, even if she had looked out through the rearview mirror before she got out of the car.
I'm sorry, I have to go against the defendant because I didn't understand what